To those of you who have tuned in for this, welcome to the webinar, which has been organised by the Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce. It's one of a series of events that the Chamber is running, and a little bit like the photograph that was up saying that the webinar was due to start shortly. As the Chamber, we try and provide a window from London into Cairo. So we're very pleased to be supported today by our partners, the Department of International Trade from the UK, and also by BIBA, the British Egyptian Business Association based in Cairo. So there's a group of us who have worked on this, and we're grateful. Most of all, we are grateful today to have with us Ayman Soliman. And Ayman is the CEO of the Sovereign Fund of Egypt. And what I'm hoping today is that you, Ayman, are going to give us a short presentation on the fund so that we can understand more about it. And I know from our previous conversation that you are, to put it mildly, enthusiastic about this. And I'm hoping that you will share that enthusiasm with people who have tuned in today. So there's no point, you've not tuned in to listen to me, you've tuned in to hear from Ayman. So I'm going to hand over straight away to Ayman Soliman, who is the CEO of the Sovereign Fund of Egypt. Good morning, Ayman.
Morning, Ian. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for hosting us. I'll try and run quickly through a presentation about the fund. Before I start that presentation, I just want to give you a brief background. This is not our first interaction with the business community. However, as the market changes with the COVID situation, it imposed a lot of changes and adaptations that everyone is feeling it, and probably everyone around this conversation is also adapting to this, and likewise we are also adapting to this. And in this context, the presentation I'm sharing is our ambition, our vision, pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID as well. Our resolve it hasn't changed, but what we're aiming to achieve is the thesis remains solid, but we're maybe shuffling our priorities. I'll try and reflect that through my presentation to you. Without further ado, I'll share my screen to run through a very short presentation about the fund and the purpose behind creating the Sovereign Fund. There we go. I hope you can see this. Well, the idea of creating the Sovereign Fund is a very simple and straightforward idea. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are joining the ranks of 40 plus sovereign funds around the world. We are maybe the latest among in the region. We're the most recent addition compared to other markets that have launched their sovereign funds recently as well. Others have started this industry altogether, like Kuwait, for instance. They're the ones that conceived the first sovereign fund. The idea here is that we are creating and monetizing and unlocking value for the future generations. There are many arms and many bodies in the Egyptian economy that tackle value, that tackle industry, that tackle finance, that tackle the economy at large. But we are a unique body that is recently coming. We're not, as I said earlier, we're not reinventing the wheel, but we are a unique body that is targeting value, particularly, and targeting long-term value, reimagining our resources, reimagining our capabilities, and this is the main driver that excites us. There are certain key parameters that we try and abide by, knowing where the market has evolved, knowing where the economy is. A lot of sovereign funds come to consciously try and diversify the economy. A lot of sovereign funds come and try to create certain economic pathways, creating a diverse sector into the economy, and they actively invest in that sector to build, for instance, CIS economies that are maybe single activity driven. Then they try and consciously diversify out. This is a very long pathway towards development. Fortunately for us in Egypt, we don't have to do this. Egypt is already diverse as an economy. So what we're trying to do is to capitalize on opportunities, to capitalize on those elements of the economy that are already promising, unearth them, nurture them, grow them, and actually champion those ideas of growth going forward. With that in mind, we try to see Egypt through the lens of the investors, be it a local investor, a foreign investor, or a regional investor, or even other sovereign funds. When we look at Egypt, we look at what a large economy. We look at political stability. We look at exchange, how we manage to transform the economy. All of these are factors that investors care to explore while they are looking at where is the thesis, where is the driver. Long-term growth and long-term value is something we are looking to unlock, and when we target and build our elements of strategy, we looked at where can Egypt hit the road running in the short term, where can we aspire to create long-term strategies that create long-term value, and we tackle different investors and different partners to try and achieve those goals. Very quickly, the macro of Egypt is something I'm not intending to go through. However, I'd like to highlight that FDI is a significant KPI that Egypt has a lot to recover. It's something we've seen in the past. It's not an aspiration that we have not been able to achieve. Now with the economic recovery, economic stability, Egypt can become an attractive market again. The single item that I'd like to focus on here is the infrastructure, the amount of infrastructure that Egypt has invested in. The government over the past 5 years, knowing consciously that the Egyptian economy was not an attractive economy, they stepped up and significantly invested in the economy with boosting government spending. So government spending has been a driver of economic growth and GDP growth over the past 5 years. Now it is time for the private sector to come in and kick in and take over that. And Egypt is not foreign to this mix where the private sector, local businessmen, and international investors driving economic growth for Egypt. This is something we've seen before. So now we're trying to regain that mix. This is something that one of the key short-term opportunities we see is the infrastructure. Although, yes, the Sovereign Fund of Egypt does not stand for becoming an infrastructure investment fund. However, we are quite excited about this category. The excitement in this category is the amount of capital and investment that went into that space, and we see a good opportunity for us to capture steady returns, to create partnership, to attract foreign direct investment, and to also help the government recycle its own capital that went into that significant category of assets. So over the past 5 years, I reckon a number of around north of $100 billion went into infrastructure. Not all of those infrastructure investments are monetizable or investable or open for partnership. But we as a sovereign fund, we're now meticulously going through all those investments and trying to unlock new categories of assets that are exciting to us, exciting to our partners and investors to come into that space. By doing so, we'll allow the government to recycle capital, and by doing so, we will be sitting on populating a decent portfolio of long-term yielding assets, and typically a sovereign fund should look at longer-term investments. So this is a category that's close to our hearts. However, when we look at the diversity of the Egyptian economy, we see a significant component and significant concentration on oil and gas. The manufacturing base leaves a lot to be desired. communication infrastructure. Of course, real estate is a growing sector, and it's a crowded sector already, so there's enough capital flocking into that sector. What we aim to achieve is to unearth new sectors, revive probably tourism. Tourism is a significant part of our economy and has always consistently been a significant part of the economy, but it's a cyclical business, and I think the COVID is a testament to this. But on the longer run, it remains to be a significant resource to the economy that could that has unmatched potential, given the heritage that we have, given the prospects of this of the economy. All of those prospects are underutilized in our view. So when we try and create investment pathways, we also focus on this sector as a long-term investment sector that is promising and probably appealing for significant upside. Run through those. The services part is a significant component. The composition of the economy, manufacturing again, and SMEs are significant components of the economy that have very high potential growth. Financial sector. If you look at the composition of the Egyptian economy, it is already diverse, but the weights of the different sectors is probably the mix that holds a value, a potential for change. What are we designed to do? And our strategy is split into two parts. We have a mandate. Our mandate is typical to any other sovereign fund, is to create long-term value, sustainable long-term value for future generations. Our mandate is, and this is an opportunity that we see, is to create a stable, robust portfolio that has sustainable income. We create best-in-class partnerships, best-in-class investment opportunities. We are very conscious around ESG. ESG scoring is becoming a necessity now, and it's becoming a conscious criteria for any investment structure, even for lending organizations. I'm sure within the audience there are many that can attest to this as well. And Egypt has so much to offer in ESG. Investments that are structured into Egypt or into Africa at large are ESG score boosting investable opportunities. And this is at the heart of our proposition. Where is the mandate compared to other sovereign funds around the world? You've seen investment or sovereign funds that are towards activist diversification mandates. Some are stability funds, some are reserve management, and some are mixes, and some are a future hedge towards a depleting resource like the oil-rich economies. We are somewhere in the middle. We're not an oil-rich. However, I'd like to think that we are resource-rich, but our resources are different. We are rich in our climate could be monetized to become a sustainable source of energy, and BinBan stands as a manifestation of this, and we need to create more of those. But so the Egyptian Sovereign Fund is a mix between a reserve management, a wealth management, a future generation buildup, and a mix of a development agenda, but we are profit oriented with a development angle that will be a decent byproduct of our activity. How do we structure our investment opportunities? We enjoy unique access to government assets alongside liquidity to invest. So the unique access that we have are the wealth of assets that Egypt has, between underutilized government assets, between plots of land, between repurposed assets that could be repurposed, and concessions that we design alongside our counterparts at the government and offer to the market, similar to the most recent concession that we had announced for the development of Bab al-Azab, an area around the famous Cairo citadel, at the heart of Cairo, the heart of old Cairo. And this area is a touristic yet service oriented area that could be reimagined and rediscovered at the heart of Cairo. And this is something, for instance, that we have created out of scratch. We argued for it, lobbied for it, and thankfully managed to sign it. Despite the corona, I think it is a long-term investment that is definitely going to pay off. So we structured our products through tapping the different asset owners, and just to put in context what has been happening and what has been announced around about the fund's partnerships. We have two sets of partnerships. We have partnerships with asset owners, government bodies, government institutions, public banks that are asset owners that have a plethora of opportunities that we investigate and try and find investment opportunities. And we have also investment partnerships with investors that are looking at the market, looking at opportunities, and we try and draw parallels between us and those partners. And those partners are looking for either sector specific or looking at geography specific investments. When we structure those partnerships, we are tapping supply and demand. We're structuring our own investable products, and we're also structuring our partnerships to cater to appetite. And in forging those partnerships, we look at partners that can help us achieve our sought investment thesis. The sectors that Egypt has, given the diversity that I've just alluded to, are plenty. Between tourism, between energy and infrastructure, between financial services, food and agri, healthcare and pharma, and the education. The last two, healthcare and pharma, is where I was alluding to at the beginning of the presentation, where our priorities had to reshuffle given the COVID and given the appetite change also on the investor side, and given the immediate needs that have risen, and probably the post-COVID change that's going to last with a change in the consumption and behavior around the use of medical facilities, around the abundance of medical facilities. These are long-term investments that probably now has become the time to start investing in those, to be able to manage and react better to similar scenarios. And this priority is shared among other sovereign funds. We've joined different forums of conversations with other sovereign funds around the world, regional concentrations, as well as global dialogues. And the common theme across all is definitely food security, health security, and medical security. And in our view, infrastructure remains a key theme that didn't wither. The appetite did not wither with the COVID. It continued to be strong, even with regional alliances being rethought, and now the regional consolidation and collaboration between economies and sovereign funds is becoming a current theme that we're actively in dialogue with other sovereign funds. And the parallels that we draw with those are to create champions in the region, to put to better use our multilateral and bilateral trade agreements with other countries around us, and of course, as an overall driver of global economic activity and global growth, even with capital flocking in from Europe, Asia, or the West, all that capital is seeking return, and it's seeking investment activities. Africa, in our view, offers the best investment opportunities now, the best yields now, because for the mere fact that we are way behind in infrastructure investments, we are way behind in our ability to communicate intra-Africa. To travel into any African country, you have to go through either Europe, through South Africa. Then there are significant infrastructure, logistics opportunities to manifest those relationships and put them to better use. And these are the sort of the themes of the opportunities that we see in investing in logistics and infrastructure, investing in definitely food and agri, sharing the abundance or moving towards abundance through better investment into conventional industries that probably could use good capital injections to boost their efficiency and enhance their abundance. I think with that, I would conclude the presentation. We have this theme that as a sovereign fund that we are focused on. That theme is when we're presented with an investment opportunity, we're presented with an investment opportunity where we need to look at the value proposition. We are profit-oriented, however, we have an investment conscious. So we look at our ESG, we built those into our governance. At the end of the presentation, I'd like to just give some highlight around the governance and how we are structured as a fund. We operate, and you hear in the press about the sub-funds. We are designed to be to run as a private equity like fund. We're not foreign to any concept that you see around any other sovereign fund around the world. However, when we operate through specialized investment vehicles, sub-funds, where we can harness the talent. We have a specialized board of advisors, investment board, investment professionals that are maybe sector specific for that area. We are also flexible in creating partner specific investment vehicles or funds. But at this stage, we are launching our specialized sub-funds with different partners, but they are industry focused. Our governance is very simple. We are a management team, an executive management team. Executive management team reports to a board, and the board by design is comprised of majority of independent board members, 5 independent board members, 4 government board members. The government board members are the chairperson, non-executive chairperson, the Minister of Economic Development, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Her Excellency Dr. Hala Saeed. We have 3 representatives of 3 different ministries, a representative from the Ministry of Planning, a representative of the Ministry of Finance, and a representative of the Ministry of Investment. Those representatives are all part of the board. The investment committee is a subset of this board, and the members of the investment committee are a subset of the independent board members by design. The majority of, and that board reports to a General Assembly. The General Assembly has 11 members, and by design also the members of the General Assembly are independent members. And this composition makes sure that this fund runs as independently as market as possible. So we are tapping talent, and later on we will announce to the market all the recent hirings and the ranks of the sovereign fund. We've been blessed with excellent talent and our ability to attract talent. So in the very near future, we'll be announcing our bench power or bench muscle, as they say. So on that note, I will conclude my brief presentation. Thank you.
Ayman, thank you very much indeed for that. I find it interesting. It's not just what you're saying, but sort of the approach that you're adopting this. And so we're going to open this up to questions. But whilst our audience actually put a few things together, can I go in terms of the way your fund is operating? You're talking about investing primarily inside the country as opposed to funds which are going outside the country in terms of sovereign funds. What's what's the difference in the thought process between you and just some other venture capital fund? I mean, or are you just like that? Is that what you are?
Thank you for that question. I didn't cover maybe that point also. Our mandate is not only Egypt, of course, but given our initial starting point and our initial access to significant asset base that needs to be utilized, monetized, and then we can snowball the proceeds of those investments as we crystallize the value and extract value out of those, then we can join the ranks of the other sovereign funds on the buy side. So yes, we're not maybe on the buy side at the early stage, but once we create our own wealth, we will start snowballing this value as we go along. We operate as a private equity fund. Okay, we don't on our charted yield curve and our charted investment strategy. We haven't allocated a portion to VCs, but we invest in green fields. We don't shy away from green fields. But we're not a VC investment fund, but we are a private equity investment fund. Maybe within our portfolio, within our sub-funds, you can find traces of capital going towards a startup that can nurture and co-invest and partner with VCs. But that's not a core part of our investment strategy right now. But we are, at the end of the day, we are a private equity-like run fund. Eventually will morph into a fund of funds setup as we populate our portfolio and the sub-funds are created.
Okay, now, I've got two sort of follow-up questions on this, and then I'm going to throw it open to the floor. So there's some questions beginning to come in on this. But I mean, one of them is in terms of whether foreign investors or even Egyptian investors wanting to participate in the fund. I think that the two parts of the question is, where do they enter? Would they look at investing through the sub-funds that you've mentioned, or would they be looking for a stake in the main fund? And secondly, what's the sort of scale? Because this is not like digging the Suez Canal, where the population all chipped in with modest amounts to create a very large sum. I'm assuming that you've got a threshold of the scale of investment that you're looking for from people. Can you give us some insight into how that is meant to work?
Yes, the main fund is 100% owned by the Treasury Department. So this is 100% owned by the Egyptian government. Our playbook, as I can put it, is we create those, we populate the sub-funds. Sub-funds are going to be our own investment arms, but within the sub-funds on the operating asset level or on the portfolio company level, this is where we forge those partnerships. We are, for instance, we've launched this pharmaceutical fund. This is a pharmaceutical fund that we launched with a partner that is an asset management partner. And that is a joint fund between us where we participate through our our specialized fund. So we participate through our dedicated investment arm. And at the longer run, our playbook, as we populate those assets, we can then avail access to some of those specialized strategies to private sector investors. Currently, the partnerships that we are actively seeking are partnerships with sort of industrial investors, industrial specialized investors. If I'm going to turn around an agribusiness or an industrial complex, that turnaround, I need a credible counterpart that has sort of skin in the game with me. We are perfectly aligned on risk appetite, and we're perfectly aligned on what we aim to achieve. And through that partnership, we unlock the value of that asset. And unlocking the value of the asset, a turnaround of a manufacturing facility, for instance, takes that value threefolds, tenfolds. Once that thesis is realized, then we are in a monetization mode. We're not married to the asset. So at that stage, we can either take that to the stock market to widen the shareholder base. We can take it to a strategic investor. If the mix of the ownership is a majority to the sovereign fund and a minority to the operating partner, then we can avail access to the operating partner to have access to a majority and controlling stake, or to even exit to the market. We're flexible in that context. We're not married to any of the assets, But the key driver there is, are we exiting at fair market value or not? Are we exiting at the best value for that asset or not? And at that point, at that mature point, where we decide to either recycle, exit, or even offload a portion, and we can avail access to private investors at different levels. We can avail access either through issuing LP interest or offering equity into those sub-funds and sub-investment strategies, or at the level of the portfolio companies themselves, or even issuing instruments. Like, for instance, for the infrastructure, it is typical for infrastructure assets to offer debt instruments back-to-back around those assets if you want to recycle your capital or monetize a portion of those positions. So those are all cards in our playbook for availing better access.
Okay, thank you, Ayman. I'm sure that's been helpful. So there's some more things coming in now. The first question that came up was from Mr. El Said. I'm assuming it's Mr. El Said, but it's A. El Said who's joined in, who thanks you for the presentation. And he was looking for examples on ESG-related investments you touched upon. Is that the investment simply are the investments simply aimed to boost ESG scoring beyond the G? Is there any focus on the E? Any green investments being promoted right now? You mentioned tourism as a priority for FDI, but you also mentioned its cyclical nature. What about manufacturing? And where do you see the focus beyond pharma and healthcare? So it's actually, if you click on the Q&A, it's there. So there's a lot of questions in there. So thank you.
It's a very good question. To tackle the first part, the ESG, yes. For instance, I refer to Benban. Benban is the largest E on the planet. It is the largest solar farm on the planet. Sustainable, renewable, environment-friendly energy source. So this is as E as it can get. And our dream is to have 3 or 4 Benbans in Egypt. And that dream can only be achieved by boosting the use and the consumption of power. How do you boost demand for power? Demand for power in Egypt is the majority is household use. Second largest category is industry, and industry is a category that is definitely under capitalized and has a high potential of growth. With all of those elements of demand unlocked, Egypt can become the power hub of the region. The divide across the pond between North Africa and Europe on the cost of the generation and the efficiency of the power generation is a compelling thesis. It is something that we're very excited about. And if we're able to export green and clean energy out of Egypt to Europe, and there are multiple links now created to our neighbors in the Middle East, our neighbors in Africa, and a thesis towards Europe, all of those links, once created, will position Egypt as a renewable hub for the rest of the world. This thesis cuts across all of North Africa, and we've seen unparalleled efficiencies. For instance, Ian, if you set up a solar farm in the UK, that solar farm, you will need, for the same 100 megawatts, for instance, you produce out of the desert in Egypt, you will need 2.5 times the space and the number of solar panels to be able to produce the same 100 megawatts in the UK. So this is how much our climate is monetizable, and this is when you turn that into an opportunity. So the cost of power generation is a fraction of what you have in Europe, and this could be a win-win. You have legislative mandates to create a mix between renewable and conventional power generation with the depleted fossil fuel reserves. All of that makes a lot of sense. However, conventional power generation will have to be part of the mix. There is also an E element there as well. An E element in the conventional power mix is more efficient and environment-friendly conversion cycles or conversion power plants. And these are all the ideas that how we position and structure ESG score enhancing opportunities. water treatment, desal, solar powered desal, desalination stations. All of those are on the E side. On the S side, on the social side, empowering investment with and partnerships with SMEs, creating championships and multinationals out of the region to go into to conquer the rest of the world, investing in education, investing in healthcare. All of these are on the S side. Governance is built and baked into our design. On the governance side, as a sovereign fund, as an operator that partners with international investors, local investors alike, we are bound to have transparency. We are bound to have solid governance parameters. We bake it into our decision criteria, our investment evaluation criteria. So we think, we believe actually that this is our way forward, and this is no longer a luxury or a flagship that you claim. It is how you do business, sustainable business in the longer run. So it is part and parcel of our DNA now. The rest of the questions around FDI and of course, we'd like to position ourselves as a catalyst to FDI. Some other sovereign funds are doing the same. And we're not, in the short term, we are definitely focused on FDI. We're definitely focused on creating that abundance of capital. Egypt as a market, as an economy, is seeing shortage of capital, and it's not a shame that we have that. But we enjoy other abundance in other areas. We have abundance in resources and in manpower. So we have to create that good mix, and that good mix, to put it to good use, will create long-term value for us and for our partners that co-invest alongside us.
Ayman, thank you for that. To the audience, please continue with the questions on the Q&A is the best place to put it. James, I spotted your hand go up, but there's a few people ahead of you in the queue. So can we, Ayman, just clear down the couple of questions that came in on the chat? The first one is from Alex at Vodafone. Good morning, Ayman. Thank you for your presentation. And can you please clarify, basically, how much are you going to spend in 2021? How much money is going to be out there? And are you looking only for new programs, or, as you mentioned in Old Cairo, or are you interested in investing in existing businesses operating in Egypt? And I'm sure Alex is not thinking only of telecoms, because I know that in Vodafone he's been expanding beyond that.
Yeah.
Well, so could you do that one first, please? Thanks.
Sure. I can give you some highlights around our pipeline. I'm not at liberty to disclose any of the pipeline projects, but some are already making their way as they are announced. Our pipeline is a composition of everything. We have brownfields. Probably the majority of our pipeline is in brownfield investments, and the brownfield investments are either into infrastructure, into turnaround and repurposing assets, and we also have some greenfield, but they're not much. From a capital allocation standpoint, now we're looking at a portfolio of 50 to 60 billion pounds of assets that are going to be our target AUM by the end of this year or early next year, by our first anniversary. But we're looking at also a pipeline of roughly 10 billion pounds. And the 10 billion pound range ranges between transactions in greenfield, as probably less than 20% of that number, but the majority are brownfields. And the brownfields are where you have a thesis to put an asset to better use, to scale up and grow assets, and to also create regional championships. This is across different industries. We're looking at pharmaceutical as of course is an obvious one, food manufacturing, agri, tourism is there, infrastructure, logistics. So it's a well diversified and industry, of course. Yes, so we have a couple of investments in the industrial space that are very exciting. a brownfield and a greenfield.
The next question on the chat is from Mohamed Khaled. Mohamed is, of course, a board member at BIBA. His father is a board member at the Chamber, and it appears from his message that he knows you well. So there you are. So I think I would summarise Mohamed's question as being: are you interested in people who want to put in big amounts of money? I would have thought that was an easy answer, but perhaps you'd like to answer it more fully.
Well, I'd answer that cautiously, not to offend the ones that are not going to invest big, but investments could be with good ideas as much as it is with capital. And we are actually in partnership, especially in the fintech space, with partners that are rich in ideas and good ideas and very smart ideas that can be deployed at a very cost-effective investment, but it is bright enough to put us on the map. It is bright enough to create a championship for Egypt in the region, and in the fintech space, Egypt has a significant advantage with the adoption of technology and with the regulatory framework compared to other African markets. And I think, Ian, if you would look at the deployment and the adoption of mobile wallets in Africa, Egypt versus Africa, and customer ownership. As a relevant example, if you look at a market like Nigeria, for instance, Nigeria has, and I've looked at that market in different capacities over the past years, Nigeria is a market where the mobile operators, because of the poor banking infrastructure, or underdeveloped, I don't want to judge, but underdeveloped banking infrastructure, probably underdeveloped regulatory framework compared to a developed telecom, multinational brands there, a very strong balance sheet. So the telcos now are providing for inclusion services. They're providing for financial inclusion and mobile wallets, and they have a higher market share compared to the banks. It is the other way around here. We have a strong banking sector, we have a strong regulatory framework, and we have a market that is rich in technology and rich in initiatives that are geared towards inclusion. And with all the microfinance operators, the emergence of the direct lending licenses, now the contemplation of the new banking regulation and the tier 2 licenses and the SME banking, all of those initiatives, they create massive market opportunities for investment in that space. And all the technology that you need to have that digital economy flagship, and you own it and coin it as a leading market in Africa, are there. And we are actively investing behind that thesis and with very strong conviction in that thesis.
Ayman, we've got one last question that popped up in the chat. I was trying to clear those down. Then we've got quite a lot of questions up in Q&A, so we're going to have to crack on. So a very quick answer for Ame Abu Zaid, which is basically, will you consider investments in the arts sector? We know in the past Egypt's been very strong in developing, artistic products and in all regards. So. Is a quick answer on that?
In a way, we will nurture this because our master plan, for instance, in the area of Bab al-Azab, does include galleries, does include craft shops, and nurturing and reviving all those crafts that we had. So it is going to be a cultural destination, and cultural destinations will enrich. So how many galleries do you have in Egypt? You have concentration of Cairo. We need to have many of those spread around to tap talent. So it is, in a way, yes, it is going to be benefiting all the cultural investments that we make. The master planning of Cairo as a cultural hub, with the exodus of all the government agencies out of Cairo, reimagining that part of town with all the riches it has with architectural designs and unique buildings, is going to be something that definitely create a destination that can nurture all those arts and industry, the industry of cultural enrichment, as I may call it.
Okay, thank you. Now, could we go on to the Q&A session then? and that there are, I'm very pleased, there's three very short questions there, which may take a little bit longer to answer. But it's basically in terms of sector focus, again, financial services. Are you looking for regulatory change on a wider basis for encourage foreign investment? And can you talk a little bit more about, the involvement of private equity and the proportion that's the three questions that are coming up next on the Q&A.
In reverse order, because the private equity involvement is, we're very conscious not to crowd out other investors. And being conscious that we come from a backdrop where the government has been doing a lot of investment in the past years. The government has been perceived to be crowding out investors, and the hat that we're wearing is, okay, we will not compete with private equity investors on any of the transactions that they're building. On the contrary, we're trying to create more investable opportunities, and we will co-invest alongside other private equity investors if they'd like, or we can invite them to transactions where we will take the backseat. We'll gladly take the backseat on any transaction, but we will create our own set of assets and access to our own set of investments and investable opportunities that do not crowd out the market. On the contrary, we aim to attract different categories of capital that haven't looked at Egypt before. Infrastructure funds are not foreign to the market in Egypt, but there are other specialized funds that maybe have not seen Egypt on the map on the manufacturing side. If we are able to put Egypt on the map for those investors, then we are attracting a different breed of investors that have not looked at the market before, and we are their hand holders, we are their catalysts to encourage them to invest. From that, I move on to regulatory changes around encouraging foreign investors. I think that is at the heart of the current administration's priorities. They are geared towards enhancing private sector participation. There are many KPIs that we're actively monitoring around private sector participation. The mere fact that the sovereign fund is launched with a more agile and flexible law to allow it to forge partnerships that are friendlier to our partners, and we are allowed to structure market-like investment partnerships. That flexibility and that agility is only a manifestation of that intent to deregulate and to attract more, to become more attractive to foreign investments. And I think compared to other markets, I don't know, running an unfair comparison, but Egypt had capital restrictions, for instance, during the turbulence years. But now with the lift of the capital restrictions, this is something that you stand behind. This is one of the key parameters compared to other markets where you don't have capital restrictions, even at the darkest times and economic downturns. So those are all the elements that you try and stand behind and own as support for attracting foreign direct energy.
Okay, thank you. The next one, I suspect you're not going to want to answer, or you'll be answering by I can't talk about that. It's a specific one on the aluminium smelter, Mehdi. You were saying you don't talk about anything you're specifically doing. So do you want to deny that you're looking at this one, or do you want to just say no comment?
No comment. That's an easy one.
It is no comment, is it?
It is no comment, but in general, we wouldn't shy away from looking at similar opportunities. Definitely.
Okay, that's fine. Now, Sharina Sabai is asking, there's a surplus in the market and British investors in the market are suffering about because of the required approval to enhance their investments and actually sustain what they're doing. So now this is from our experience as the Chamber. It's the sort of thing where we would talk to one government department who will actually say, it's not ours, go and talk to the other guys. And, you're smiling because I think you know the pattern, because somehow about three months later, you end up back at the same department you started with. So can you are you with the use of the fund going to become a facilitator to help improve this because you can take a part in these investments?
Well, take the smile off the record, but yes, we can definitely. This is part of us structuring the partnership and the investment opportunity. It is our burden to, if for instance, a new investor is coming in and we are availing a partnership in a touristic area. So, for instance, let's take Bab al-Azab. It's a live example. For us to have Bab al-Azab ready for investment, we do all that heavy lifting. We create the partnership. We do we tick all those boxes. We talk to different relevant government agencies. All those assets that are coming to the fund to repurpose and invest in are actually going through that process. This is where once that asset is cleared and comes to the sovereign fund as an investable asset, or either comes to us as an AUM or comes to us as direct ownership, then it is cleared from all of that bureaucracy. It's typical. So yes, this is part and parcel of how we can become a friendlier interface for investors.
Shireen has a follow-up question which pops up a couple further down, which is, could you specifically help with the electricity ministry? So she's obviously got something in mind here.
Well, the electricity ministry they are one of the richest in infrastructure investments, and it's no secret that we are eyeing some of the assets for co-investment opportunities, and definitely we are working very closely. They are a very knowledgeable counterpart, bound by all the regulations. We have to operate within all of those regulations, but we're working at a pace that is quite satisfactory. So.
Ayman, let me step aside slightly from the list of questions for a moment and ask you then, because it's related to these questions that are coming up. If people have got questions to understand a little bit more, you're going to be very busy. But is there a contact point in the Sovereign Wealth Fund that people can send an email to or something to try and get some specific answers?
Yes, we have an email address on our website, and we actively react to that. As we're scaling up the team, and we will announce that in due course. We have almost a full rank leadership team. And as we scale up, we're of course overwhelmed with the number of transactions, the pipeline that we're creating, but we are actively utilizing our partnerships with local advisors, international advisors, to help share the load in grinding all those investment opportunities. But at the same time, it is our bread and butter to not to let leave any stone unturned. So we are looking at every email we receive. We're looking at reacting to every inquiry we receive, and we are open for business. So this is the banner at the door.
And I don't know what that email address is. Is it waste paper basket at the Sovereign Wealth Fund, or?
It is info at sovfundegypt.com. And our website is tsfe.com, the Sovereign Fund of Egypt acronym, .com, and this is where we react to all of those emails. We have our team. Maybe we can share the contact names after this session. You can send it out to the attendees, so we can definitely entertain any inquiries or business propositions. We're definitely open for business.
Well, that would be great, because look, as the chamber, if we can just stay in touch, then we'll happily send it, because we know who's been on the call today. So let's go back to, rather than me ask questions, even if I'm convinced I'm being useful, the audience want to know the answers, and Chris Reeves written in. So, you know, post-COVID, he's looking at technology, connectivity. I think he should be addressing this maybe to Alex, who was on earlier at Vodafone. But, you know, is there a plan to invest in the technology sector and infrastructure?
Absolutely. Technology at large, yes, and we're not. I don't want to speak too soon about our pipeline that we're trying to bring to life, but definitely Egypt has a good advantage on the tech side. We have a good advantage on the tech infrastructure side, to be more specific. We're aiming to monetize our position, geographic position, as we used to learn at school at the early days. Egypt has a central location connecting 3 continents, etc., etc. Now is the time to bank on this. Post-COVID, there are a number of opportunities that are presenting themselves. Supply chain, rethinking supply chains, rethinking actually diversity around DNA compositions, and some of the research houses for large investment houses are now entering a formula into their criteria to have DNA diversity, and how you react to pandemics, how different parts of the world react, how climate has an element to affect those. And the diversification out of China is a big theme, and everyone is trying to present, and we're raising more than 2 hands in the air saying we are here open for business. Compared to other economies in Africa, we have a significant advantage of an industrial base. The investment in the infrastructure that we have, the abundance of power and access to ports and access to logistics is an advantage that now is the time to monetize, and we are tapping those themes. Those logistics, those superhighways could also be superhighways for data, could also be superhighways for processing, financial services, fintech, definitely all on our radar and on the active pursuit category.
Okay. Now we're now coming on to one which is quite pointed of, fine, what are the returns going to be? So it's Alia Mubayed. Now Alia has been a great friend to Egypt in terms of attracting investors for a very long time. So it's good to hear you're on there, Alia. But thank you for the presentation, promising. Can you clarify how the returns of investment for the fund are going to be gone back or not into the treasury coffers? Is there legislation on this? And what is the expected or targeted returns that you're aiming to achieve, in particular in 2021?
That's a tricky question. Okay, a simple answer is, because this is a sovereign fund, this is a long-term investment fund, we're not designed to pay out profits to the government. This is not the purpose at all. What the law says is, at the event, only at the event that we double our capital, and now our capital our target equity has grown from 200 billion pounds to £1 trillion. So at the event that we double our capital and we achieve all of that in returns, we can distribute up to 20% of our profit. So that tells you we're not designed to distribute profit. We're designed to snowball and continue to grow that portfolio. And this is an exciting element in our mindset. As we design our investment strategy, we design long-term returns. Alluding to the return point, because we're building our portfolio either through minority stakes or tag-along investments, or majority towards a minority and relinquishing control in the future, all of those designs of partnerships, we are looking at yields that are acceptable to our counterparts. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. We are, through the collective experience of the investment team and all of the team in the fund, we understand. If you're going into infrastructure, you know where the target returns are, dollar-based returns, what would the adjusted risk-adjusted returns would be for your 5-year investment horizon, 15-year investment horizon. So we are mapping our yield curve. And that yield curve is mapped similar to our partners. We should not be making any more or any less than our co-investment partners. So the composition is going to be a byproduct of our investment decisions. But I can assure you, we're not investing unless it is acceptable to both sides of the we are perfectly aligning ourselves to our co-investment partners.
But by and large, with a longer-term view, this is something that I think we as the Chamber have talked about in the past, is sort of For investors who want to benefit from investing in Egypt, it's best to invest, with the country rather than try and make quick bucks out of the country. Would that be a fair description of the approach from your fund as well?
Well, yes, but there's no shame in investors coming in through either. There are multiple entry points to any economy, either through the stock market, where you can be a quick hit and run investor, or through a direct partnership through an LP and an asset manager, or you can come into the longhorn investors that come in directly and establish their own footprints here. We are going to cater to all. At the early stage, we're catering to those long-term investors that are deploying equity. So we're in the first years, we are looking at equity investors where we can co-align, co-invest. We share the same amount of risk. Eventually, as our portfolio grows, there'll be stakes in public equities, and those stakes, then investors at that point are free to do as they will, either hold for a longer period or divest. We're going to enrich the market with more offerings, and as we do so, then it becomes a more liquid and easy.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, thank you to James Watt for putting his question into the Q&A, so I don't have to find out how to get back to you when you put your hand up. James, a former ambassador in Cairo for HM Government, from Majesty, I should say. Okay. James is interested to hear about your strategy with regard to the Suez Canal investment zone, and what extent strategic investment planning is done together. So can you address that one, please, Ayman?
Yes, there's one. I'm looking at my colleagues because I'm bound by confidentiality, but there is one investment that made its way to one project that made its way to the press. It is manifesting that location advantage. The Suez Canal economic zone is an attractive venue for industrial. It is an attractive zone for supply chain investments, and they have decent infrastructure already in place with industrial zones that they have. So we're looking at monetizing this. The one project that we are co-sponsoring with the Suez Canal Industrial Zone is a light rail construction facility, rolling stock electric rolling stock construction facility, alongside a consortium of private sector investors. We are looking at setting up this to cater to the local needs. So Egypt is expanding significantly with the award of the monorail linkage to the new administrative capital, the upgrade of the underground network, the creation of new lines in the underground network, the Cairo-Cape Town railway connection. All of those present significant demand for rolling stock, and there's a very strong existing infrastructure and existing production facility with the government industrial base, and we're looking to create a new tech hub that can cater to the electric vehicle demand. So this is, for instance, going to be hosted and located in one of the industrial zones of the Suez Canal economic zone. This is one way of manifesting that partnership, and we have three other ideas that we are actively pursuing in the data infrastructure space, in the tech space, and on the logistics and supply chain spaces.
Okay, I think
manifest that partnership.
Right. Now, possibly encouraged by your answer earlier on the arts, we have a question from Sama Mateaware, who I probably pronounced your name wrongly, apologies, but would you consider investment in media or sports in the UK? Now, we already have a couple of Egyptians who have invested heavily in football clubs in the UK. So is this sovereign fund going to follow on?
Well, no, I don't see us there in the short term. We're not enjoying the luxury of the buying power that other sovereign funds may have. But we're definitely investing in sports might be something that is also going to be a byproduct of our portfolio and exposure as we create new venues, then definitely sports could be one of the activities that benefit from our investments. But to be quite frank, I don't see us doing this.
No.
But maybe
Well, I think
it could be something exciting to look at.
Well, Hull Football Club and Aston Villa have already benefited from private Egyptian investment and other things. So anyway, back to some of the other bits. There's a question regarding the change in the law regarding the sovereign fund. Is there somewhere that people can actually go and look, or is it actually on your website just to understand better what the law changes are?
Yes, there was a press coverage around this, but once that law change is coined, then it gets published. Only then it gets published. So it's going through that administrative process, but it was approved by the parliament recently. The law changes are, just very quickly, a refinement to our flexibility in being able to co-invest alongside other investors. We are bound to transact on assets at fair market value. And what the language of the law says right now is that we have to have 3 independent valuators to evaluate any asset we transact on to make sure that we are transacting at fair market value. We added to that clause the flexibility, for instance, for co-investing through a competitive bidding process with an investor. And so if the competitive bidding process is a process that yielded a valuation for that asset, it is something we can also co-invest alongside that valuation. We don't have to pause the process and create our own parallel evaluation process for us to be able to proceed. So it is that spirit of flexibility for the fund to be able to transact at market and to have the same flexibility that our co-investment partners enjoy.
Okay, thank you. Now, Sharif is a biotech research scientist who's joined this, and he's wondering why is Egypt not investing enough in science? I don't think that's a question for you, but I think it would be a question which would be, are you thinking of doing more? Yeah, well, are you thinking of doing more?
Well, as we, I haven't in my personal capacity, I haven't invested in the pharmaceutical space long enough to claim any experience in significant experience in that field. However, as we developed that thesis, we started to learn and understand where do we stand in the manufacturing process and the value chain? Where do we stand in the R&D space? And in R&D, you cannot just allocate a portion of your GDP and you say, I'm going to start R&D. No, there are regulatory changes, and I'm sure Sharif would know this firsthand. The regulatory changes that need to be in place. There's an infrastructure that needs to be in place, and you need to start where others have ended. So you need to forge partnerships with other R&D houses, and then you acquire that knowledge gradually. And as you evolve, and then you can invest more with more authority into that. And authority is a tax term. I think you invest with more confidence and more knowledge into that space, knowing exactly what you aim to achieve and knowing where you have the advantage. And I think Egypt is now starting to create the regulation for this with the clinical trials regulation passed. So now Egypt is taking a step towards that, and probably once that ground is laid, then investments would come in, and we are already actively pursuing dialogues with multinationals in that space to try and attract their attention towards investing in Egypt with that view in mind.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm conscious also that I know that you have another meeting at 12:30, and I know you have to prepare that. So if we go for the last couple of questions, it works quite well. There's a couple of questions in here from Faisal Isa. And I think these are interesting points that he's raising, which is to understand the alignment of coordination with GAFI or Ministry of Investment. I mean, clearly Ministry of Investment, you've got representation on your board. How does this work with GAFI overall? And the second one is one which I think will be of interest to a lot of people, is, you know, how can SMEs get engaged here? Because very often when we're talking about big investments, it's focused on the big ones. So the question is there a mechanism for investing in SMEs who are perhaps specialized in some of the areas you're going, or would this be a question for yourself? So if you could address both of those, then that would be great. Thank you.
The second question is a longer question, and I'd like to, I like that question. The first one, definitely we work in tandem with all the government bodies, and the investment authority is actually actively pursuing to attract, actively pursuing attracting investors to the market. And they are the one-stop shop that investors go to try and start their business, to navigate through the system, and all of those. We're not to be compared to Gafi. Our mandate is different. We are an investment fund. We are an investment body. So we identify investment opportunities. We can go to Gafi similar to any other investor and see how we can make that an investable product. We navigate and ask questions around what is the legislation around that investment opportunity, what is the legislation in that sector. So we are the same audience as investors interacting with Gafi. We invest alongside investors. So maybe we can have a collaboration with Gafi where if they have an investor that is interested in something that we are actively investing in, they can maybe direct them towards us. So this is the sort of collaboration we can have with Gafi and with the representation on the board and through the linkage with His Excellency the Prime Minister, we are able to have that linkage. So we're working in tandem with them. Because there was a bit of confusion earlier in some previous Q&A sessions in different venues around are we competing with Gafi or are we doing something? We're not. We are promoting our own investment opportunities and co-investment opportunities. We're not, by doing so, we are definitely promoting investment in Egypt, but we're not the body tasked with investment in Egypt. We are promoting co-investment opportunities alongside us as a fund into Egypt. So this is probably a better term for us. The second question on the SMEs, definitely the composition of the Egyptian economy is actually a majority of SMEs. Similar to a market like Italy, for instance. Italy, the GDP composition of the SMEs comprise the majority of their GDP activity. Egypt is a market where SMEs need to be nurtured. And all the successful businesses, all the successful families that have started their businesses and grew regionally and then internationally, they've started as SMEs. So the ecosystem to nurture SMEs and to grow them and scale them up starts with banking, regulations, and having the ability to have access to fair market opportunities. And fair market opportunities are better availed through the use of technology, through the creation of venues where SMEs can compete for opportunities. And the vision and the dream I have are the venues that we will be actively trying to create on supply chains in the food sector, supply chains in the industrial sector. When you build an industrial cluster, for instance, feeding industries for industrial themes that we create, if we nurture feeding industries for the rolling stock supply chain or the production line, it's a win-win. We are looking and vying to enhance local production and the local components as a sustainable counterpart that has sustainable demand from the Ministry of Transport. So we know we have to supply so much units per year, and those units translate into demand for other local suppliers to supply us. As that, it's a supply chain. As you pull that supply chain through robust demand and sustainable growth, then you are creating sustainability for those SMEs, and then you can help them scale up. And as they scale up, then you are creating more champions and creating more centers of excellence in the economy. And we definitely have that at heart.
Okay. I think we all look forward. I mean, clearly it's a very much a developing stage for what you're doing. And I think we all look forward to hearing more about the sub-vehicles or the sub-funds that will actually potentially make that happen. And the other one is, I can, from what you've been saying, I've not heard about it, and I suspect it's not there yet, but actually is maybe there will end up being some sort of sub-fund that can invest across your portfolio. which is a vehicle for Egyptians who live abroad, who still the challenge that, and again, we hear it sitting in London, is if you know people in a business, you can think of investing back in the country, but vehicles to be able to invest back in the country. Many people have done well with government assets, which have gone onto the open market over time. I mean, in Egypt over the last 30, 40 years, that's been a very good area for investment. So I think you could potentially have a very attractive fund for people who, rather than risk one narrow business, one narrow sector, to be able to basically throw some money at you on that basis. So
I'd like to use and abuse this venue, because this is a very good point. The Egyptians abroad are a very special breed of time travelers. And time travelers, because you've been to Egypt, you've been around Africa. You see that we live in different time zones and time periods. And those time periods, for instance, Egypt may be 10 years ahead of other African countries in terms of infrastructure, in terms of banking. But we're definitely 10 years behind in terms of R&D compared to Europe. So those time travelers, they see the future. When they come here, they are investing with stronger conviction, because they know exactly those leapfrogs that can take place. They know exactly where the adoption rates. And with the younger generation, Egypt, technology adoption is a significant opportunity. And we are in active dialogue with a group of Egyptians abroad that are telling us, well, we see the future. We see that there are a number of propositions that we could offer to either the Egyptians abroad, we could offer to the younger generation, and we see those adoption rates coming very high in Europe. As we create a similar parallel in Egypt, we can definitely create a successful story. And we are actively working on brewing this idea and nurturing even further. So thank you for asking the question. This is a true statement, and through that I extend the invite to all the Egyptians abroad. If you have a special skill, if you want to co-invest alongside us here in creating your dream, in bringing the knowledge that you have to Egypt, we are an open for business arm. We co-invest, we share the risk. Not only that, but we also try and create as much de-risking elements as we can. That is good for us as much as it is good for our co-investment partners. Investing in, for instance, we notched that with looking at investing in the Egyptian sovereign debt. Egyptian sovereign debt at a point in time during the COVID peak economic disruption, the yields on that category was very attractive, and it jumped up 300 bips. And at that point, it became a very attractive investment opportunity. And when we told the Egyptians abroad, guys, if you're presented with a sovereign bond in Brazil versus a sovereign bond in Egypt, they're equal yields. However, Egypt has never defaulted on foreign debt before, on sovereign debt before. So come and invest in Egypt. As that spread tightens, we are benefiting as Egypt, because on the sell side, your valuation is compared to discounted by that rate, so that rate comes to play. And successfully, a month later, Egypt launched its 5 billion issues, and those were taken out and sold 300 bips or 350 bips below where the market was a month ago. So that's a very good testament to how Egyptians abroad can shape demand and create a win-win for their own economies. And will create similar buckets of investment opportunities alongside us and as we populate the portfolio going forward.
Okay, that's it. Look, Ayman, you have been comprehensive in your answers. You've been very clear and everything else, which I think, again, the transparency is one of the things that I think foreign investors are looking for. Stability as far as anyone can deliver it, and consistency, openness matters, and you've demonstrated that in great form this morning. So, knowing you have to go off to this other meeting, can I say on behalf of everyone that's been listening, thank you very much for everything that for your time this morning, and from your approach and everything that you've been saying to us. So, it's thank you from me to everyone who's been listening in this morning. The Chamber does have a number of events. I can't remember what the next one is, but if you're here, you must be on our mailing list. So please watch out for the next thing, where we're offering, what we keep thinking of is our window from London into Cairo. Although I must admit, some of the questions were coming from Cairo directly to you today. So it's nice to actually be able to provide, this little air bridge in the days of COVID, between London and Cairo. Ayman, thank you so much again for what you've done this morning. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.